Iowa, Donald Trump shoots up to second place with 10%. This is a Quinnipiac poll, tied with Ben Carson. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker still with a big lead there at 18%. Chris Christie places 15th of 16 candidates tested. Another national poll this morning shows Trump holding fast in second place. This is a CNN poll behind Jeb Bush. Mike Huckabee moves up to third, driving down Marco Rubio and Scott Walker.
Keep that up for a second. And let's just take that in. I mean, Chuck Todd, we've been talking about, first tier, second tier, third tier. Right now, there's a first tier, it's Jeb Bush. There's a second tier, it's Trump. And there's a third tier, it's everybody else.
It is. Going back to the Iowa poll.
Let's go back to the Iowa poll. Yes.
Which, of course, then, how about the fact that the one guy who hasn't announced is in first place still?
Yeah.
I mean, it is sort of, Walker is obviously, he and Kasich are going to be the last two in. His ability to sustain in Iowa, as everybody else, he is yet to get in officially. People have gotten their bumps. Trump's getting a bump here.
He's
others
just not making news. I mean, is he campaigning?
He's doing but I think it. What I'm saying is that he has more strength, I think, than we sometimes. We sort of have glossed over him of late, and he's still the guy to beat in Iowa.
Is he actively running around to Iowa, New Hampshire right now, John Heilemann? What's he doing? Because he's disappeared. We had 3 or 4 flashes where he had some bad media, bad press, and then it hasn't really been on the front pages of the papers.
He's not been out that much. He's obviously dealing with a complicated budget situation in Wisconsin that's occupying a fair amount of his time as the end of their state legislative session ends. The thing that, in our polling at least, that we've found over and over again in Iowa is that the Walker strength comes from the northwest part of the state, which gets covered by the Wisconsin media market. So that part of Iowa is a geographic stronghold for him that I don't think is ever going to go away, because they see a lot of him on local TV.
It's a big deal in a
Wisconsin.
16-person field.
Yeah,
it
huge.
almost means it's done. You don't want to say anything.
And I'm not minimizing it. I mean, that's a core of his strength in Iowa. Is he's got that big chunk of the state that gets to look at him every day on TV.
Is Iowa as significant now as it was 4 years ago or 8 years ago?
Look, there are all these, when you have 3 or 4 candidates that are banking on Iowa as their launching pad, right? Rubio, if Rubio wins Iowa, I think that's, he could be a rocket ship. Ted Cruz wants to make Iowa the place that he breaks out. Obviously, Huckabee and so you still, the more conservative candidates, that's going to be sort of the first winnowing there. Then, of course, New Hampshire is everybody else is making New Hampshire their make or break, a Kasich, a Christie, to a lesser extent, Jeb. But the Iowa thing is, I think sometimes we all overlook Walker too often, even though we all know he's a front runner. But I'm impressed with how he has sustained that number in Iowa.
It feels more like this year, or this cycle, that in the past, it's not like there's been Iowa is must win or New Hampshire is must win. It's like what Chuck was saying a second ago. This time it feels like both are must wins, just for different sets of candidates. There's one set of candidates that have to win Iowa,
Walker
one set of candidates that are betting everything on New Hampshire.
There's something Walker can't lose. I think Walker's in big trouble if he loses Iowa. He's one of those all of a sudden you're like,
you got to win.
He has to win.
So let's talk around the table. If you look at the candidates doing well in Iowa and New Hampshire, got Scott Walker. He's doing all right in New Hampshire, doing well in Iowa, and you've got Donald Trump second in both. Right. Despite the fact that he's spending this week suing Univision. I mean, and
before the morning's out, it may include some of us.
I just wonder though, because when I first saw that, I rolled my eyes and I was like, God, you're running for president. Don't sue Univision. Stop with the press conferences. And then I sat back and wondered, is this a political tactic? Him fighting, rolling up his sleeve, showing people he's not going to take it, suing Univision. He's up there in all of these polls, the national polls, Iowa, New Hampshire. He's second in all of them.
Let's say one more uncomfortable thing. NBC pulling the plug probably helped him short term with some Republican
I think
voters.
it did. I think If he has a fight with NBC and Univision, I think that helps him.
There's a chunk of the party that says, hell yeah.
Yeah, NBC's liberal.
Not yeah, hell yeah.
NBC's liberal. They're a bunch of left-wingers. They've got Chuck Todd running Meet the Press.
Yeah.
I'm joking about that. It's MSNBC. Primetime obviously is attached to NBC, and we can say that because every convention we go to every 4 years, for most of the people on the floor where they're waving, go to hell NBC, they don't, they connect what they see in primetime here with NBC, so this actually is a positive for Trump, probably.
I think it's more important to understand who those people are, because I don't think Trump holds them for long. It's the same group of voters that he had, remember, for a short period of time last time. Herman Cain got them. The question is, where do they end up? They're here now with Trump. But who is the candidate that channels them that they end up with this chunk of voters? I think it happens to be Ted Cruz. I think that's who is the guy that sort of gobbles up this part of the party. But I think it's important to understand who those people are right now.
And let's put up, I think it was Iowa that had Ben Carson also sitting at 10%. If you are a governor and you have run a state and you see that Donald Trump and Ben Carson are devouring 1/5 of all primary voters, you may think, I'm going to go home for a couple months in golf. Because seriously, those numbers that's the 1/5 going towards people that have never run anything in government. Now, there's an argument, obviously, that maybe that makes them better candidates. I'm just saying, for somebody that's played by the rules, it's been, a city council person, and then then now next one, then I'm going to be a state legislator, then I'll be a state senator, then I'll be a governor, and then I can run for president. And Ben Carson sits next to the president and goes, hey, I don't like Obamacare. And, suddenly he goes up. He's at 10%. Trump's at 10%. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
You got to say about Ben Carson, the one thing that's he has been at 10% consistently.
It's solid
all year long.
Doesn't really move up.
He doesn't. He just got. He's there. I guess if you were.
And he's got. I got to say, I've got a lot of Republican friends who are smart, highly educated people, advanced degrees, who love Ben Carson are going to vote for him.
I think if you were trying to look at the optimistic side, the sunny side of the street, if you were one of those student council presidents, et cetera, who looked up at those guys, you thought to yourself, kind of in line with what Chuck said about Donald Trump, you look up and you see that as 20% that's eventually not going to be with those guys.
Right.
One way or the other. If you're looking optimistically, you say Donald Trump's a novelty candidate, Ben Carson's going to eventually fold because he doesn't really know the rigors of the campaign trail. Those are all votes I can eventually get, because eventually people are going to know me better, and eventually these guys are going to crumble. I'm saying if you were trying to look at it optimistically, that's vote share that eventually is going to migrate to a more established candidate, and that's low-hanging fruit.
Throwing Cruz in there, by the way, was sitting at 9. That's 29% of the Iowa electorate is Cruz, Trump, and Carson. I get the sense that one person will get that chunk of vote, and that will be a very powerful factor in Iowa.
Let's keep the list up there, and let me ask you all a question that I'm seriously wondering about. If you look at all of these names, can you pick a name out of one of them who you could realistically anticipate being president of the United States?
Sure.
Yeah.
Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio,
Scott Walker.
Scott Walker, too?
Yeah. Well, what? Yeah.
Look, I do think he's got to. Look, I agree. I know what you're saying.
You talked to Ted Cruz yesterday.
He's got to fill the suit.
Yeah.
I do think Walker has whatever this moment is. You have to sort of start looking the part a little bit. But I think when you look at his path, he's got as good of a path to nomination.
Well, you also see Rand Paul in there, who's going to have support on both sides.
Have you been surprised at Rand Paul's?
I have. He's really kind of disappeared. But then again, so is Scott Walker. He's disappeared. There's so many people in this field that there really is a crowding out. There's not enough oxygen. So this week can be Rand Paul's week. The next week can be Scott Walker's week. The next week is Jeb's week. It is these people come in and come out.
John was talking to me right before and going, this is the desperation of July, which I thought was a very good point. As the debate season, you think, oh my God, I got to get into debates, where these candidates may say anything to get a news cycle. Because, so that they suddenly
Can get in.
You think about how do you move your national number, right? And if you think about the candidates who are on the bubble, right? The people
think
right
you're
now
right
are
about
between
this.
8 and 13 out of 16, and you got to get to the top 10. In the course of this month, the window for the Fox debate is the first week in August. And the only difference between number 8 and number 13 is like 1 point in the national polls. So what are you going to do to move yourself from 13 to 8? What kind of crazy thing will you say? What kind of outlandish
Do Simpsons
to try to
impersonations.
move that
Right.
1.5 points that
No,
gets
I
you
mean,
out of the debate stage?
absolutely.
It's going to be a nutty month.
Simpson, you know,
Absolutely.
we joke about Simpson impersonations. That's not the dumbest thing in the world. You keep your name, you go viral. You may see a lot of weird stuff like that. I think it was a good point, John.
One name we haven't mentioned yet, Chris Christie, had his big